Welcome, all of you. Apologize for being a few minutes late. We had a caucus that ran, and we will get started expeditiously. Let's begin with file item 1, the reference of bills. Number 1, is there a motion on the reference of bills?
Mr. Chairman, if
got an issue
could,
there?
I did have some discussion on that. Do you want to take that now, or
Why don't we then wait if you have discussion?
Yeah,
That's
I do.
fine.
I do.
But let's hold off because I'd like to get to the confirmations here, if you
Yes.
may, and then we'll come
I
back to it.
concur.
Okay. How about number 2? Last week the committee heard Julie Sue as chief of the Division of Labor Standards Enforcement. We did not take a vote. I would ask for a motion on that this now. Moved by Senator Alquist. Please call the roll on Ms. Sue.
Senators Alquist? Alquist, aye. DeLeon? DeLeon, aye. Fuller? Aye. Fuller, aye. Harmon?
No.
Harmon, no. Steinberg?
Aye.
Steinberg, aye.
That motion passes and will go to the floor of the Senate for action as soon as possible. Congratulations to Ms. Sue, who may be watching this on television or listening on CNN or whatever. It's so. Let us now move to governor's appointees appearing today. We do have 5 people appearing today. We always try to accommodate those folks coming from out of town who have flights, etc., to catch. And so, without objection, I'm going to ask Mr. Bayless, as a member of the Fish and Game Commission, to come forward. And I know, for Mr. Applesmith, okay. Mr. Bayless, want to welcome you to the committee. And we have a tradition here in the Senate Rules Committee to allow you to introduce, obviously yourself, make a brief opening statement, but to also introduce any family member or close friend or anybody you want who may be here with you today.
Senator, thank you, and thank you for allowing me to go first. I have a 10 and 11-year-old I'm going to get home to after this. So
I understand.
Do you want me to start?
Yes, please.
So first, I want to say hello. My name is Jack Bayless, and I want to thank you for consideration to confirm my Fish and Game Commission appointment. My leading purpose on the commission is to be a bridge between the various bookends on contentious issues, bringing balance to our discussions and decision-making. And good science and data are driving influences on my perspectives. For some background, I was born back east but grew up mostly in Colorado. I moved to Northern California and graduated from Gridley Union High School, just north of here. I went briefly to school around Chico, returning later and graduated at UC Davis with a degree in chemical engineering. After graduating, I've spent most of my career working at engineering firms, specifically focused on the environment and its infrastructure. I'm currently the Executive Vice President of Global Water for AECOM Technology Corporation, a $7 billion per year California-based corporation. Believing in giving back in public service, I've served on some nonprofits and 4 state commissions. I also was recently appointed by the White House to the National Infrastructure Advisory Council, advising the President through Homeland Security. My original and long-term interest in fish and game is being a good steward for our fish and wildlife, to be a conduit for the public process, listening to all sides of stakeholder issues, and bringing environmental expertise and approach using good science and data to make informed decisions. I also want to ensure we expose our children to fish and wildlife. As I mentioned, I have 2 children. We hike together often, and wildlife is a fundamental part of our discussions. My goals are to continually demonstrate stewardship of California's wildlife and fisheries, establish seasons and bag limits and other measures that ensure healthy and sustainable populations of California species, as well as satisfying hunting, fishing, and other non-consumptive uses. To be good in communication, listening to all constituents, increase awareness and education, specifically exposing the tremendous knowledge and environmental awareness of responsible hunters and fishermen. I also think we can build partnerships with other government entities, public interest groups, and citizens groups that can further advance the Commission's mission. And again, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bayless, let's take questions from members of the committee. I'll begin with Senator Alquist.
Thank you. Mr. Bayless, it's nice seeing you again. And as I mentioned, used to be a fisherwoman. In the 1980s, I caught a 20-pound salmon out of my 12-foot aluminum bass boat in Monterey Bay, which is probably a bad thing to be doing in a little boat, but anyway. I really just have one question, and that is, we know, for example, that fish and shellfish have trace levels of mercury that if eaten in large quantities are not healthy for pregnant women and children. And so my question is, what can or is the Commission doing to establish advisories or even limit fishing in local rivers and coastal areas where there has been historically high levels of pollution and where fish caught in those areas are deemed not to be safe?
Senator, it's a great question. And I just want to point out the Fish and Game Commission and the department have partnerships with other great state agencies. And specific to your question, the California Department of Public Health has constant monitoring of fish that work with the Commission and the department. And specific to mercury, it's the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment. They publish online per area the safe levels of fish, and they give advice to people that do fish or shouldn't fish or how much they should eat. So it's on the web, it's online. You can get through it through the Fish and Game webpage, or you can go directly to that office. But it's a relationship, and I think that's the future for a lot of government agencies as we limit funds, is to work with other agencies.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. Senator Fuller? Senator.
We had a great discussion. I appreciated all your answers and the informative. You obviously have a great background for this area. One of the things that we're still kind of working on is, what do you think is the best way to improve enforcement, increase the number of wardens that we have?
That's a great question. I think our wardens are our biggest opportunity and our weakness in moving forward because of the tremendous burden. I was just talking to one of the advocates that represents the wardens, and I think it's a two-pronged approach. One, we have to pay wardens more. I think I saw this at parks, and I see this at Fish and Game. We train them up. We spend a lot of state resources getting them prepared, but then they find they can get a much higher paying job by going to work for a city or county. So it's a real loss in state revenues when we train them, and then they go on for obvious reasons to get a better paying job. So I think we have to increase that. And a way to do it that you all can help is by either modifying their existing bargaining unit in legislation or putting them in a new bargaining unit where they're viewed as law enforcement officers and they can get the same pay scale equivalent to other law enforcement around the state. That's one. The second is more challenging. Where do we find more revenue to get more wardens? And I think we have to continue to endeavor to look for sources, especially as we bring on new programs, because the wardens are the key to making Fish and Game successful.
Thank you. Senator Harmon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to ask a few questions. I did have an opportunity to meet with Mr. Bayless at some length, and I think that he's going to do a good job and is doing a good job on the commission. But let me talk about the marine protected areas and the saltwater areas, particularly some down in my neighborhood, Southern California area. Give me your perspective, if you would, sir, on the marine protected areas and why they're good or why they're not good.
You bet, Senator. As on the record, I am a supporter and voted for the marine protected areas following through legislation from 1999. In the long run, they're a very good thing. They take less than 20% of the coast, set aside reserves that enable fish to replenish themselves and grow and populate. However, there is a loss to those people that fished, that angler that went out to that favorite fishing spot that maybe his father or grandfather took him and he wants to take his son to. We are taking away that opportunity or asking him or her to move to a new location. So there's with some great things, there's going to be tension and a loss of opportunities for the fishermen. In the long run, just like with hunting, how we regulate by bag limits and seasons, we need to start doing that more with fish, and the marine reserves, marine protected areas are the best approach. The science and data is unquestionable on how good it happens, but it doesn't replace those fishing spots for the recreational fishermen.
You have some very strong environmental credentials that you bring with you, and I salute you for all the work you've done in that area. But let me ask you, how will your support of those types of environmental issues and the environmental community interact with hunters and fishermen that and fisherwomen, thank you, that have caught 25-pound salmon?
Yeah.
How do you envision those two different sort of organizations or groups of people interacting with each other, and the involvement of the Commission in that interaction?
Senator, thank you for that question. There is a disconnect that shouldn't be there between the hunting and fishermen and the environmental community. As I grew up, some of the best conservationists and environmentalists were hunters and fishermen. I think there's an opportunity, and I've already brought it up at the Commission publicly twice, to ask the Department to start working more in involving hunting groups and fishing groups and like Ducks Unlimited and groups like that can help bring inner city youth and teach them. And so they grow up recognizing it's the hunters and fisher people that teach them about the environment. So that's where I see the Commission and the Department have an opportunity.
And your approach will be a balanced approach as a commissioner, I hope?
I recognize, as a commission, I represent all the constituents for our fish and wildlife, so I need to bring a balanced approach.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. The senators really asked, I forgot Senator De Leon. God, that was an oversight. Senator De Leon. No question. Okay. The senators asked a lot of the questions that I wanted to ask. So this Marine Life Protection Act, again, I think it's worth going back to because it's sort of the area of controversy, if you will, and the legislature, and the prior administration started this policy through the designation of refuge areas. And I guess the question is to the sport fishermen and women again, and maybe you've touched on this, how do you alleviate their concerns? Their concern is that, there are going to be fewer areas open for fishing. And of course, fishing is a wonderful pursuit and consistent in many ways with the with the environment, preserving the environment. What do you say to the critics?
It's a fair question. The process, the legislation, as I mentioned, was enacted in 1999, and it started the Department and the Commission on a process where they had stakeholders, people, recreational fishermen, commercial fishermen, environmentalists, Native American tribes met together to talk about their areas and how they could move forward. And there was it was a very good CEQA NEPA process where a lot of exchanges happened, and they decided on areas that constitute less than 20% of the coastline. However, some of those areas are the best fishing areas. And so to jump to the quick answer, Senator, to know that in 5 years those areas are going to have more fish, and outside the reserves there's what they call spillover out of marine protected areas. So areas you wouldn't fish before will now become fishing areas that might have been good 20 or 30 years ago will again return to that. In the short term, there isn't a good answer. To tell them next year, can you go back to your fishing place, if it's in a marine reserve, they won't be able to. So there's not a good short-term answer in a year. But they should understand, as we do, it's an investment California is making. It will bring back more fish. Many fishing groups have supported it. They recognize the data is there. The Channel Islands are a great example of marine protected areas that have brought back fish and greater opportunities for future fishing.
Thank you very much. Let's hear from witnesses in support of the nominee. Come on up. We ask you to come on up, and looks like there's a lot of people, which is good. I'm going to ask the witnesses to be brief. We have a long agenda today. Ms. Nothoff, welcome.
Good afternoon. My name's Annie Nothoff. I'm the California Director for the Natural Resources Defense Council, and I'm pleased to be here this afternoon to support confirmation of Jack Bayless to the Fish and Game Commission. I've had the opportunity to serve alongside Mr. Bayless as a fellow Coastal Conservancy board member, and I had an opportunity to observe his decision-making and hear his thoughtful, balanced perspective in terms of resource management in California. I think he brings a valuable business perspective to the complex decision-making that involves our resources here in California. I think he understands that healthy fisheries and a healthy ecosystem are really the backbone of California's resource-based economy and can help reinvigorate our financial and our economic activity too. As he mentioned, he has a statewide perspective that reflects his knowledge of both Northern and Southern California, which I think is particularly important for a statewide body like this. And he is very familiar with the ever-contentious issue of water that the Fish and Game Commission has to deal with on a regular basis. So NRDC is confident that Mr. Bayless will continue his record as a good steward of California's natural biodiversity as well as our economy, because I think that the balancing of economic and environmental protection is one of the key responsibilities on our statewide commissions, and we urge confirmation of him today. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Good afternoon, Chairman Steinberg and distinguished members of the Senate Rules Committee. My name is Marcela Gutierrez. I'm the director of the Sud Project and a founding member of the Latino Ocean Conservation Coalition. Again. As an advocate representing underserved communities, my job is to bring attention to the most pressing challenges facing our oceans and waterways, many of which will significantly impact Latino communities. Our state's Fish and Game Commission must ensure that our waterways and wildlife are properly managed in the face of challenges like climate change, ocean acidification, and drought, so that it may continue to provide opportunities for recreation and sustenance for all Californians. Mr. Bayless brings decades of experience dealing with the challenge of resource management to the Commission, especially with respect to sustainable use of water. His experience with water has informed his understanding that the Commission must provide for the needs of the people while also taking into account the needs for the resource. And his extensive background managing civil infrastructure, water, and transportation projects brings a unique background to the Commission. Mr. Bayless' extensive qualifications include an accomplished track record of public service on many boards and commissions, such as the National Infrastructure Advisory Council and the State Coastal Conservancy. His supporters include groups as varied as the Sports Fishing Conservancy, tribal government councils, civic groups, and numerous statewide environmental organizations.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to wrap it up, please.
His expertise will be a tremendous asset in the challenging times to come, and I respectfully ask you to confirm his appointment to the Fish and Game Commission.
I'm asking remaining witnesses if you can name an organization and a sentence or two about your support for Mr. Bayless, that would be great.
Certainly. Thank you, Chairman Steinberg. My name is Paul Hobie, representing the Ocean Conservancy and our over 13,000 members here in the state of California. We wish to offer our emphatic support for Mr. Bayless.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Welcome.
Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Sikich. I'm the Coastal Resources Director for Heal the Bay. I've actively worked on MLPA implementation in the South Coast and have been very impressed with the balance that Mr. Bayless has sought in that process and his willingness to listen to the multiple stakeholders and try to find the right solution for short-term and long-term needs of our coastal resources. I think his technical understanding and engineering background also bring something that's very important for the Commission, and I urge his confirmation. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Sarah Stadina, Executive Director of Wild Coast. We conserve coastal and marine ecosystems and wildlife. Specifically, we have a very social justice approach to the work we do. We work with some of the most underserved and lowest income coastal communities in California, whether it's Salinas, Ventura.
Slow down.
Sorry.
Your words are being recorded for history
South
here.
San Diego. Sarah Stadina, Executive Director of Wild Coast. We conserve coastal and marine ecosystems and wildlife. We have a very social justice approach to our work and work with some of the most underserved communities in coastal California, like Salinas, Ventura, Oxnard, and South San Diego County. Our members and supporters include Girl Scouts, military families, Border Patrol agents, ranchers, and Latino and Asian American church congregants, non-traditional environmental communities who believe in that it's important to have access to and sustainable and balanced use of our state's natural resources. And for that reason, we're taking a strong endorsement of Mr. Bayless for the Fish and Game Commission. We're very involved in the MLPA process. We mobilize thousands of young students, the future of California, to support that process. And we believe that Mr. Bayless will make sure that all Californians have access to our state's wonderful natural resources. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and committee members. My name is Pamela Flick, and on behalf of Defenders of Wildlife and our more than 160,000 members here in California, we respectfully urge the confirmation of Mr. Bayless for California Fish and Game Commission.
Thank you. Did you add a sentence or two, if you would, please? We don't want to read. We don't.
Sure.
By the way, if people have written statements, we're happy to take them and put them into the full record, and we'll even peruse them. Yeah, we read. But it's helpful just to everybody in terms of testimony. Come on up and give a sort of a punchy, brief summary, and that's what we'll remember too.
You got it, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Mr. Bayless demonstrated interest in constructive, balanced solutions, his commitment to conservation and sustainability of our state's fish and wildlife resources, and his knowledge of coast and ocean issues make him a much-needed asset to the Commission. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Chair Steinberg, members of the committee, my name is Amy David, and I'm here on behalf of the Monterey Bay Aquarium. We believe the Fish and Game Commission plays an absolutely vital role in maintaining healthy wildlife populations for all Californians, and we believe that Mr. Bayless has the integrity, experience, and knowledge required for effective service on the Commission, and we urge you to confirm him.
Thank you very, very much.
Crystal Mollenkamp on behalf of Audubon, California. We very much appreciate Mr. Bayless's service on the Commission and urge your aye vote.
Thank you for testifying.
Good afternoon, Chairman and committee members. My name is Sarah Manzada, and I'm here representing the California Coastkeeper Alliance and our 12-member waterkeeper organizations. During the past 11 months, during Mr. Bayless's term as an interim commissioner, our groups have worked closely with him, and upon consideration of his appointment and confirmation as a commissioner, our groups were vocal and unanimous in support. Thank you.
Thank you very much for testifying. Are there any other witnesses in support? Are there witnesses in opposition to the nominee? There are witnesses in opposition. If not, I would gladly take a motion on the nomination. Moved by Senator Harmon. Thank you very much, Mr. Bayless. I appreciated the way he answered my question about at least recognizing on the fishery side, that there's a long-term answer, even not a short-term answer. And I know it's controversial and difficult, but I appreciate the fact that you're cognizant of that balance and that you're fighting to protect the environment. So with that, please call the roll.
Senators Alquist? Alquist, aye. De Leon? No. De Leon, no. Fuller? Aye. Fuller, aye. Harmon? Aye. Harmon, aye. Steinberg?
Aye.
Steinberg, aye. That
passes by a 4-1 vote. It will move to the floor now. Thank you very much, Mr. Bayless. Appreciate it. You can cheer if you like. No. Okay. All right. Next, I would like to welcome up Jacob A. Applesmith, who is here to be considered for confirmation as the Director of Alcoholic Beverage Control. Mr. Applesmith, welcome to you. And I know you're going to be introduced by our esteemed colleague, Assemblymember, former Senator Wes Chesborough. We welcome you and take it away.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and members of the Rules Committee. It's a pleasure to be back over on the Senate side. I'm here to offer my strong support for Jacob Applesmith as the Director of Alcoholic Beverage Control for the state. And as the currently Assembly member, but formerly Senator from wine country, I know that the people in the Shenandoah Valley and Lodi and the Central Coast would dispute that, but having represented Napa and representing Sonoma and Mendocino presently, many of the state's small winemakers are located in my district. I chair the Assembly Select Committee on Wine, and I previously chaired the Senate Select Committee on Wine. And also, I'm proud to say my Assembly district has more craft brewers than more than twice any other Assembly district. So we are the place where a lot of the high-quality beverages are produced. And during the time that I've had to work with Mr. Applesmith in his acting capacity of pending Senate confirmation, I've observed that while he understands the great importance of enforcement of alcohol laws to protect public safety and to protect minors, he also understands that these industries are very, very important industries in our state and produce jobs, produce revenue, and are part of the California mystique. They're part of who we are. People talk about California, they think of our coastline, they think of Hollywood, they think of wine. And hopefully soon they'll think of California craft brews as the best in the world. And so I do think that's a balancing act in a Director of Alcoholic Beverage Control. Mr. Applesmith has demonstrated already that he understands the importance of that being strong and heavy-handed where needed, being supportive when it comes to the fact that these are very important businesses to our state to produce high-quality products that, in fact, promote themselves as to be consumed in moderation and as part of a general lifestyle with food. And California has pioneered that type of alcohol production. So I am quite confident that upon confirmation, we will all be pleased with the work that he will do on behalf of the people of the state. And so I strongly urge your confirmation, and am pleased to be able to introduce him to you today.
Thank you very much, Senator Chesborough. Mr. Applesmith, welcome. Please introduce your family and any other special guests.
With me today is my wife, Beth, and my daughter, Violet.
We welcome you both to the committee. Thank you for being here. And Violet, someday you might be sitting up here yourself, either where your dad's sitting or where one of us is sitting. It's all possible. It really is. Welcome. Why don't you make a brief opening statement, and then I know I'm going to lead off with, I think, maybe the most important question here. Go ahead.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I appreciate the opportunity to appear before you this afternoon, discuss my goals for the Department of Alcoholic Beverage Control, and answer any questions you have regarding my qualifications. The ABC can play an important role in furthering the effort of Governor Brown and the legislature to improve government services and promote a healthy business environment in California. As a public safety agency, the ABC's mission is also to improve the quality of life for Californians by regulating businesses that sell alcohol and enforcing those laws that are violated in and around venues where alcoholic beverages are consumed and sold. As director, I will ensure that the ABC's licensing and law enforcement functions are focused on adding meaningful value to California's public safety and economy, and to ensure that the ABC engages with the public so that the public understands the value of our work. These goals are crucial to instilling confidence in the ABC, and they should be pursued in all aspects of California's state government. As an example of how I intend to achieve these goals, we at the ABC have pursued during my tenure a series of stakeholder meetings to address a variety of challenging and emerging issues, including internet sales of wine, provisions of gifts and other things of value in connection with the sale of alcohol, and training programs for employees who serve and sell alcoholic beverages in restaurants and retail stores, programs that are designed to prevent sales to minors and sales to over-intoxicated people. These stakeholder meetings include industry representatives, abuse prevention advocates, academics, and members of the public. By including our stakeholders in the process and working through these issues, we will achieve better results and better relationships with the people we serve. When Governor Brown was Attorney General, I had the privilege to serve as the special advisor to him and also as the chief of the Bureau of Gambling Control. As chief of Gambling Control, I was in charge of an agency with a similar mission and structure to that of the ABC. We licensed, regulated, and engaged in criminal enforcement in relation to an industry that has traditionally been viewed as associated with vice. That was the most professionally challenging and enjoyable job I've had. And when Governor Brown asked me what role he thought I could play in helping California as part of its administration, I expressed interest to him in the ABC. It is an honor to have the challenge and the responsibility that goes along with this position. I thank Governor Brown for appointing me, and I thank this committee for considering my qualifications.
Thank you very much, Mr. Applesmith. We've known each other for probably close to going on 20 years, and I followed your career, and you are incredibly accomplished and I know well respected in the governor's office and throughout the legal circles. And there's no but to that. But I'm just concerned about whether or not you are being asked to take on too much. Maybe your wife has that same concern. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. But you're in the governor's office doing tribal compact negotiations, overseeing BT&H functions in the absence of a secretary. You serve, as quasi-legal counsel or legal counsel on, I'm sure, a variety of different things. And now you take on this hat as the director of this major state department. How do you do it? You must sleep. How do you balance the two? And really, the question is, no question about your capability.
Sure.
But can you do justice to being the director of a significant agency while inside the horseshoe?
Sure. As you mentioned, I have 3 jobs right now, and the BT&H one is truly all-consuming and has, quite frankly, not allowed me to pay as much attention to the ABC since January when I was actually sworn into the job. Fortunately, I have fantastic staff, and I have an agency that is really well run, none of which is to my credit. So I was really lucky in that regard. The BT&H job is one that I really have to shed. So if anyone has any candidates for secretary to encourage the governor to consider, I would, and my family would greatly appreciate that.
Yeah.
So how I would, my long-term role will really be as the ABC director, running a department, but also then on essentially in my spare time negotiating compacts and other tribal issues for the governor. It's a tough juggling act, but it's one that I actually did at the Department of Justice. I was the chief of the Bureau of Gambling Control, and I also advised him on a whole range of issues from criminal aliens to medical marijuana to prison reform. In the world of Jerry Brown, this may seem difficult to people. In the world of Jerry Brown, it's what's expected.
Well, there's a can of worms here, because the governor is very hands-on, I think, to his credit, and he demands a lot of his staff, also, which I think completely appropriate. We all do. But if there's a rap that's sort of out there, it's this, that the governor surrounds himself with very talented people, like yourself and others, but there aren't enough of you. And we hear that a lot. And now you're, admitting that you're going to have to do this job while you continue at BT&H, while you negotiate tribal compacts. Your long-term vision is to, obviously they're going to appoint somebody at BT&H at some point, so you get to give that up. But the tribal compact thing during busy season, as tribal compacts come up, that's more than a full-time job. So, you know, look, I support you, but I'm just, because you're so capable. But, you know, to the administration, and I'll express it to the governor directly, this is of a concern. I mean, having one talented person take on 3 major roles, I don't know. I'd like to hear from other committee members, and we can have a little discussion. Senator Harman.
Well, I have the same concerns, and you know, if I address it from the perspective of the people of the state of California, taxpayers, constituents, the industry, the people that buy alcoholic beverages, I think they're entitled to have a full-time, on-the-job, 24/7 director. And you're telling us in your testimony that you haven't been doing that since January. I haven't heard when you might, if at all, become full-time doing just this job. Is there some time frame involved when that would happen?
Yes, Senator. As soon as we can get a Secretary of Business, Transportation, and Housing appointed, all those responsibilities will shift to that person. As you may know, we have, in the governor's office, we do not have a cabinet office, so our secretaries report directly to the governor. We don't have staff supporting that function. So those functions would go from me to that person.
Okay, and then moving on to the negotiation of the tribal compacts, it's my understanding that a number of compacts are going to be coming up in the 10-year cycle because they were sort of authorized around 2001 and 2001 and 2002. I'm guessing that that's something that's getting pushed up to the top as far as workload and involvement and difficult, comprehensive negotiations going on. How will that fit into your duties as the director?
Well, it's not part of my duties as the director, obviously, but it certainly is a challenging life. But it's one that I was able to manage at the Department of Justice. I did lots and lots of negotiations with law enforcement and other groups while I also ran the Bureau of Gambling Control. And so currently I have made every effort I can to do what I do with the ABC. I still do all the proposed decisions. Those are just what I do on the weekend. I've been to all my offices. I've been on undercover operations in a variety of situations. As I was telling with some of your staff, I even was involved in a bar fight and a manhunt in the city of Eureka. One of the reasons Wesley agreed to come support me today, probably. So it's not an easy life, but it's one that I'm confident I can do, and it's one that, as all of you know who have dealt with the governor, and I'm sure you all have, he asks tough questions, and people who don't have the answers for them don't stay in the positions they're in. So I have done this with him for about 3 years, and I'm confident I can do it going forward.
Let me shift to one other topic. It's my concern about the high level of vacancy and the enforcement positions in the department. What can be done about that? What is your plan to try and enhance the number of enforcement positions? What can the legislature do to help you solve that problem if you perceive it to be a problem?
Sure, it is a problem, and our rates of handling criminal complaints, arrests, and generally compliance investigations has gone down. That has largely been a function of the furloughs and of the vacancy rate. So we are in the process of filling our 21 positions right now. That will bring our vacancy rate down from about 35% to about 17-18%. So in the short term, I think we're going to be able to hire people as soon as the Department of Finance clears our budget process, which is happening right now. The long-term issues are actually some of the same that Mr. Bayless described, which is that we can hire people. We don't generally have any problems with the recruitment, but it's the retention. And the retention problem is really a function of the pay. And then it's also a function of the
That
fact...
was the same problem he referred to.
Correct,
about.
but it's more than just the pay for us. We're trying to work with the Department of Personnel Administration right now. We had our classification taken away from us. We were merged into a broad investigation class, investigators class that would include us with the DMV, with the Department of Insurance, and other investigators who are not 24/7 peace hour officers like we are, who do not work at night, who do not work in drunken crowds. And so we are trying to address that with the DPA right now. That is an important aspect for our mission because peace officers are very proud people and we need to be recognized for who we are. So I'm hopeful I can work that through. The pay issue is a long-term problem. When the budget situation is more stable than it is now, it's our hope to have some of that addressed. And generally, let me also say, of course, we're a specially funded agency, and our industry is largely supportive of that because they do support us and they do support strong enforcement.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. I have no further questions, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Senator De Leon. We'll come back around.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Pro Tem. I do share Mr. Pro Tem's concerns with regards to you being overstretched right now. Obviously, it's not a reflection of your capabilities, talents, or skills, or your past experience. More than anything, I've heard members of this committee shower you with much deserved accolades. So obviously, what happens in the executive branch with regards to, and I know we're in an economic crunch, and that's played a big role with regards to how we roll out certain programs. You know, obviously, we've been on the end of making very difficult and at times draconian cuts. So, but that is a real issue. And again, I think it's a reflection of who you are as an individual, because obviously you are favored, at least it's my estimation, in a very good manner, very highly respected manner.
Thank you.
The issue of flavored malt beverages, I want to broach that subject. Obviously, there's been a large concerted effort, if you will, to have these targeted, if you will, towards a certain demographic group here in the state of California. I know the Board of Equalization has changed the tax status with regards to these types of beverages. From what you can see, you know, is it working, not working? What needs to be done?
We don't have any empirical evidence that says that it's working.
Anything anecdotal?
And that's something that should be explored either with alcohol and drug programs or academics who are interested in this field. But it's really our experience from observation in the field more than anything that has told us that these drinks appeal to young people. And that's what is essentially been behind the movements against them. And we support those movements because we do believe that they are things that young people target at times when they're not really responsible to drink them.
Thank you.
Senator Alquist.
Thank you. I just have one question. As the daughter of a tavern owner who spoke 5 languages, and my mother once in a while was the bouncer when it was a cocktail lounge, other times it was a tavern or a bar and grill. In your letter to Rules Committee, you stated that one of your goals is to focus the department's efforts to assist in the state's economic recovery. Last month, actually July 10th, the San Francisco Chronicle ran a story about how it can take a new business as long as 6 months to receive its liquor license from the department. So my question, and I know how talented you are and how many hours you spend on the job, which are probably way too many, but my question is, how can the department expedite the licensing process for new small business owners and reduce some of the bureaucratic and red tape and reward good businesses in this licensing process?
Right. Thank you, Senator. There's two aspects to the issue. One is what the department can do, and then what actually happens with agencies that really are beyond the department's control, and that's local review, local zoning issues. The Board of Equalization is frequently involved when there's person-to-person transfers. But that said, in San Francisco actually is a good example of the challenges we face, because there, some of the delay, quite frankly, is our fault. And the reason it's our fault is that through the furloughs, we basically lost 3 months over the course of 3 years. And so we have tried to respond to the economy and to places where we have heavier volumes, for example, by having other offices do work for San Francisco where it's less busy. But the simple fact is, and we're trying to build towards this to argue for the resources, that as the economy grows, one of the things we'll see, and one of the economic indicators, of course, is that retail businesses, entertainment venues, restaurants will be the ones who lead the charge in California especially. And so I am concerned that we're not adequately prepared for that, particularly in high volume areas like San Francisco and San Jose and at Los Angeles. And so that is something we're very mindful of, and we're trying to address it. But it's really, for us at least, it's a boots on the ground issue. Although that said, one of the stakeholder groups we do have is working with them to figure out various administrative processes that do bog us down in ways that may not be helpful and may not be promoting the public good. So we are working on that. We've already got a couple things related to, for example, mass transfers of licenses. Okay.
Senator Fuller?
Well, Jacob, I enjoyed meeting you in my office the other day for the first time, and I really don't know much about your past, but as a former superintendent with a very large staff of my own, I understand why the executive officer of any organization in times that are financially constrained would feel very lucky to have found a person as brilliant as you are. And I feel very sorry for your family. But since I don't really know, as well as our distinguished panel here, what the demands of the jobs that you're being asked to do, I won't weigh in on that question. But I will say that the answers that you gave me about what you're doing about the backlog, the examples that you gave me about knowing about Bakersfield and the surrounding area, and my experience of evaluating just the capabilities and credentials. I think you are a really good candidate for whatever you are willing to take on. Having said that, I personally recluse myself from ever having to vote on anything that says that we gave you a mental breakdown for allowing you to do this kind of opportunity. So I'm going to listen to my wise colleagues about the total amount of the load, but I do believe you are a unique individual.
Thank you, Senator.
No doubt about it. No doubt about it. I don't think there's an answer to the question they're raising. It's more of that we're raising. It's more really a question I think that we need to address with the governor directly, and I will. And I will do so between this nomination moving to the floor and our taking up the nomination as a full Senate. I mean, we're setting aside the question of whether it's fair to one individual, because we all make our choices, and that's fine. We all chose to run for office. That's not really what it's about. I mean, just take, you could imagine a scenario. I was just kind of taking some notes here. Pick a given day in the fall when there's and I know there won't be, but there could be something comparable to a Carmageddon 2 that the BT&H folks need to be on top of. And the newspaper on the same day does a major expose on underage drinking. And on the same day, you've got 5 compacts that you're wrestling with and trying to balance. Now, you can delegate. There's a lot of things that the leader can and should delegate to very good staff. But then there are a lot of things that the leader, him or herself, needs to be directly involved in. What happens if you have one of those days, or one of those weeks, or one of those months, or one of those 3-month periods or 6-month periods. Assure us that nothing's going to fall through the cracks.
Sure. I've had some of those days, Senator, no question about it already. And we get those exact kinds of scenarios you're talking about. This summer, we've been fortunate. We haven't had major disasters, although we're very concerned, for example, about what's happening in Lincoln right now.
I'm sorry?
What's happening in Lincoln right now with the propane tanks. So, you know, we have bodies of people on the thing. Generally, though, what I would say is that we rely on having very talented people, as you're suggesting, who can, in fact, be there when we cannot be there. The situation with business transportation and housing is not sustainable long term. There's just no question about that. And it has delayed my ability to be at the ABC and do more meaningful things than I have been able to accomplish thus far. So that, there's no doubt about that. In terms of the tribal responsibilities and the ABC, those are things that I'm confident I can do. But again, it just requires a lot of personal sacrifice, and it requires a lot of staff who do great work every day for me, both at the ABC and at the Attorney General's office, the Governor's office, and all the agencies within Caltrans and the CHP. I'm blessed to have fantastic people. But I do take your concern, and I have it myself sometimes, no question about it.
Thank you. Let's hear from witnesses in support. Mr. Loper.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Dennis Loper, representing the California Beer and Beverage Distributors and their president, Victoria Horton. We're here in support of Mr. Applesmith. We've had the privilege to have worked with Mr. Applesmith both at the Attorney General's office and since he's been acting director of the ABC, and we find him to be thorough, thoughtful, and fair. We find him to be very knowledgeable of the issues, and we think that he will be an excellent director, and we hope that he comes up for confirmation soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Senators, thank you very much. Jerome Encinas on the behalf of the Rincon Band of Luiseno Indians and the Fort Independence Paiute Indian community. We're in a very unique position because we both do the compacts as well as are in front of the ABC on various occasions. And I will echo exactly what Mr. Loper said. His thoughtfulness, his willingness to meet with us, and his openness, understanding, and respect of tribal governments is bar none at the top of the list. And we appreciate your support and look forward to seeing him in the ABC.
Thank you very much. Are there witnesses in support? Are there witnesses in opposition? Okay, well, certainly as a clear and unequivocal sign of confidence in you, in your ability, I'm prepared to move the nomination and support the nomination to the floor of the Senate. I do want to have, I think, some more discussions about the questions that we have raised here today before we actually move your nomination off of the Senate floor. With that understanding, I'll happily take a motion.
I will move approval, but I will state that I have great concerns. The testimony and the things we've heard about you, sir, is you are unique, you are brilliant, you do an excellent job, but you're doing 3 jobs at one time, and I am concerned about that, and I'm going to, as it looks like the chairman is going to be supportive of you, I am too, but I am not making any commitment on how I might vote on this issue when it comes to the floor, and I encourage the pro tem to talk to the governor about this. We need to have some kind of resolution of this issue is the message I would like this committee to send to the governor. With that caveat, I will be supporting the motion.
Very good. Let's call the roll, please.
Senators Alquist? Alquist, aye. DeLeon? Aye. DeLeon, aye. Fuller? Aye. Fuller, aye. Harmon? Aye. Harmon, aye. Steinberg?
Aye.
Steinberg, aye.
That's a 5-0 vote, and we thank you and your family again for the public service. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Ms. Ina, how are you doing? We'll get some time. Okay. Next, I would like to ask Toby J. Douglas, who is here as a nominee for confirmation as the Director of the Health Care Services Department. Welcome, Mr. Douglas. Please, again, please introduce any member of your family or close friend or staff, and a brief opening statement, and we have some questions.
Great, thank you. First, I want to introduce my wife, Gretchen Schroeder, and my mom and dad, Adrian and Esme Douglas, and my mother-in-law, Miriam Schroeder, and my chief deputy, Karen Johnson, is here, and my deputy, Kelly Green. So, good afternoon, Senator Steinberg and members of the committee. It's an honor to come before you and be heard for this nomination. And I just want to thank you for considering me for this appointment as Director of the Department of Healthcare Services. Over the past decade, I've committed myself to improving public service. I've successfully managed and implemented critical healthcare policy both at the local and state level. And I've done this with both healthcare delivery and financing, most notably in Medi-Cal, which serves over 7.5 million people and a population and a budget of $46 billion. My experience has prepared me as a strong leader, and I'm confident that I'm able to continue leading the department as its director. My vision for the Department of Healthcare Services is based on the following 5 goals. First, we must instill greater public confidence and trust in the department through open and frequent communication with our key stakeholders to ensure that our policy decisions are informed by their input. Second, we must focus on improving the health of the population, increasing the quality of care, and reducing the per capita cost of care. Third, we will protect limited government resources and taxpayer dollars by fighting fraud, waste, and abuse. Fourth, we will continue to maximize federal funding to reduce any pressures on the general fund. And finally, I will focus on managing the department in a way that delivers innovative, high-quality results in a more cost-effective manner. To implement these goals, I will be undertaking many important projects, including advancing healthcare reform, which affords millions more Californians with the opportunity for affordable healthcare coverage, implementing new and innovative fraud-fighting strategies, developing organized delivery systems to serve our most vulnerable individuals in Medi-Cal, which will ensure more cost-effective care and the ability to provide home and community-based care, implementing the many budget reductions that are facing the department in a way that minimizes the impact on our beneficiaries, our providers, and the broader healthcare delivery system, and integrating behavioral health programs into the department in a way that advances our overall mission and really enhances these vital services so that we have better opportunities for behavioral health as well as physical health for our beneficiaries. And finally, continue to strengthen our operations within the department by developing a strong, knowledgeable, and dedicated workforce. These are enormous responsibilities, and I believe I'm well prepared to succeed. I thank Secretary Dooley, Governor Brown for appointing me to this position, and again, I thank you for considering my appointment as the director. And I would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Douglas. I know I have some questions on the implementation of the Adult Day health care decision. And I can wait on those and have other colleagues ask other questions about it.
My question's in the same area. So
same area. Do you have something different, Senator Alquist?
Mine's on SCAN.
Which relates to ADHC.
It does.
But go ahead.
It's almost the larger, but if you would like to go first. It's up to you.
Well, let me think about it. Okay. Is that all right? Because, look, this is a current issue, and we all know, again, you're a very qualified individual. But in some ways, this is, an on-the-job evaluation, and how this issue gets implemented is crucial to the lives of thousands of people. I don't want to use this forum to argue about the policy issues. The legislature had a majority in the legislature, they had a slightly different take on how to do this, but that decision has been made, and the budget is done for now. He's vetoed bills, etc. I don't want to relitigate. But the essence of the policy now is that these facilities are going to close December the 1st. And my concern, respect the providers and all, but it's not about the providers. It's about the 33,000 people or so who are going to lose this benefit with the promise of being transitioned into something that is going to care for their needs. And with that many people, in this short of a period of time, we are, and I think I can speak for a lot of my colleagues, we're deathly afraid that people are going to, vulnerable people, elderly people, people who can't, traverse the transit system and go to and from different things in order to get everything that they need, that they're going to fall through the cracks. And we'd like to know from you today, and I know that the Assembly's had an oversight hearing. I know the Senate Health Subcommittee is going to have an oversight hearing on this subject very soon. But what can you tell this committee as you are seeking confirmation about what the department is doing to make sure that people don't fall through the cracks? And then secondly, what is the metric by which you and we and the public are going to be able to determine that, in fact, all of those people have been taken care of?
Okay, great. Thank you, Senator Steinberg. And as I said in my comments, this is an enormous responsibility and challenges, and there's nothing greater right now for me than this transition of Adult Day Health Center beneficiaries. It's very hard on me, it's hard on the department, and most importantly, it's hard on the providers and the beneficiaries. And we, as the governor made a decision, and it's my job to implement that decision in a way that ensures that I minimize the impact on our beneficiaries. And in this case, our goal is to make sure that we transition the beneficiaries off of the Adult Day Health Center in a way that allows them to continue to remain independent in the community. There aren't going to be the same level of resources available, the same program. It is being eliminated, but our goal is to develop an approach that ensures that they can get other cost-effective services, and that's what we're doing. And we're doing this through building off our organized delivery systems. We have managed care in 30 of our counties, and when it comes to the Adult Day Health Center population, about 34,000, a little over 34,000 of the 35,000 reside in managed care counties. So what we want to do is build off an organized delivery system that can ensure they get that Senator Steinberg talked about, making sure they don't fall through the cracks by providing care coordination and assessment. Over the coming months, we will be voluntarily enrolling them in starting October 1 so that the plans can assess their needs, make sure that over that 2-month period they work with the Adult Day Health Centers to develop a plan and make sure that they receive other cost-effective services. In some cases, it might be working with the Adult Day Health Centers and they'll continue to provide the services. In other cases, it might be fewer services. It will be building off of in-home supportive services and other home and community-based options. So we are building a plan to use our managed care plans to provide those services. This is not easy, and that is why I took the action and sent a letter to you several months ago where we decided rather than September 1st to implement that we weren't ready. And I took the action to delay until December 1st.
Is it possible you won't be ready by December 1st?
We believe right now our transition plan is a very comprehensive plan that lays out a path to do comprehensive assessments, coordination of services, and provide the right services come December 1st. But as I said in that letter, I'm continuing to assess. I'm looking at how we're doing on the transition, and we'll reassess as we go along.
And with the legislature, in all probability, not being in session in November or December, do you believe you have the unilateral ability to continue to extend beyond December 1st if necessary?
I do. But based on the director's authority, there is authority that my lawyers have determined, and that's why I was able to make that decision that even though state statute said September 1, that I could extend it to December 1st, and if it's needed, with consultation, of course, with the governor and Secretary Dooley, those decisions could be made. But as I said, right now we think that we're on a path to do this right.
So you're confident that the 30,000+ people by December 1st will comfortably receive what they need, even if it's different from what they have received?
I couldn't say it in those ways. This is a hard transition. But my goal, I mean, this gets to your second question around metrics. My goal and our goal is to make sure that they can remain independent in the community. And a big important metric is making sure that there is an institutionalization that is different than the rates of institutionalization under the Adult Day Health Center program. Some of this population was moving in and out of hospitals and nursing facilities, even with ADHD. We're going to track to see, is that changing? And if that is changing, then we've missed the mark. It's going to be a tough transition, so I can't say comfortably, but we're going to do it in a way that provides them the services to remain independent.
See, here's the rub. Here's the problem here. Even though this decision to eliminate ADHD was budget-driven, in the end, we agreed and compromised on a massive cut, a 50% cut, but money, including, in addition to then the federal match money, to provide these services, however they look. And respectfully, it's not enough to say this is hard. If it's hard, and it can't be done in a way that you can tell us and everybody that these vulnerable people are not going to fall through the cracks, then you can't shut it down December 1st, in my opinion. In other words, it's got to be real clear to people. Those seniors, those elderly are accounted for. They're, when I say comfortable, I know that's a subjective term, but they've got the array of services, that the logistics have been worked out. They're not having to fend for themselves in terms of figuring out how to get from pillar to post. There needs to be some comfort around that, however we define it together, before there's a decision to shut these centers. Now, it's not about the centers. It's about the people. And so I'm concerned when you answer that even by December 1st, in making the decision to shut them down, that there may not be that comfort. I say there has to be, recognizing there's half as much money. There's some tension here, but we all have the same goal. Got to save the money. Program needs to change. But we eliminated this part upon a policy basis too, that there were real alternatives that would ensure people would not be set aside and forgotten.
And we believe, again, Senator, that by building on our managed care plans, that they are going to provide, if we define comfort as care coordination, making sure an assessment's occurred, an entity is going to make sure they're facilitating the other services they receive, then that will happen. That is why we're doing the transition on October 1, so the plans have over 60 days to do it. But it won't be the same services. And that's where, it's not that there won't be changes for these very vulnerable beneficiaries.
All right. I'll turn it over to others. Continue, Senator Oquist.
First, I'd like to say that I have known Mr. Douglas, particularly in the area of healthcare, for many years, as I chaired Sub-3 Health Human Services, Labor and Veterans years ago. Then I chaired the Health Committee for 2 years, and I'm still on the Health Committee. And now my capacity also for years as chair of the Subcommittee on Aging and Long-Term Care. I'm going to go into SCAN, but just briefly on ADHD. I think one thing, and I wasn't going to say anything on that issue because I know time's limited and I have a lot on SCAN to say, but for the transition of 33,000 elderly people, I think we need to be assured before December 1st that positively is going to occur. And if that's not the case, then we have to know what the backup plan is. And I think we need to work with you in this area. As an example, can you assure us by November 15th that the transition in the way it has been defined will occur? And if on that date you cannot, can you present us with a backup plan? And when I say us, I mean the legislature.
The assessments that are supposed to occur are going to occur over a 45-day period. So yes, by November 15th, all the assessments should occur and there should be a plan. I can't guarantee today that when I can report back to the legislature. What I've always said is that we will continue to keep you apprised, and before that December 1st date, we will let you know on whether we're continuing forth with December 1st or if we're taking an alternative of extending or other alternatives. I'm committed, as always, to keep the legislature apprised, work with you and your staff on how the transition's going.
Thank you. So I'm sure you'll work with the pro tem on us being assured in a timely fashion.
And the budget chair and subcommittee chairs and all the members really who.
Yeah.
Now on SCAN, when you came into my office yesterday, I said, you know, Toby, you're one of my favorite people in the building. You're honest, you're competent, straightforward. But I'm really going to grill you on this issue of SCAN because it is important how the Department of Healthcare Services does its business. And as you all know, I was very brief on the other appointees, but I hope you will allow me to ask a few more questions here, because I really need to get a true understanding of how differently the department will do things when it comes to our Medi-Cal beneficiaries. As we know, SCAN is an entity that provides health care service to Medi-Cal beneficiaries, that it received excess profits of $339 million between January 2007 and August 2008. And then SCAN decided that it would not give the money back. I know that the department then reduced SCAN's capitation rates, and that currently both state and federal authorities have undertaken an investigation into the issue, and that we are awaiting a settlement with SCAN. So I have 4 or 5 questions. You've heard them before, but I wanted to be able to say them in the public. I know in correspondence with me, you have said, I am committed to resolving the overpayments as soon as possible and getting this money back into state coffers. I am also committed to making sure we stop anything like this from happening again. In a recent letter to the controller, you said that the contract does not allow the department to directly make any recoveries from SCAN. So here are the questions, which will sound familiar. How will the department hold entities like SCAN accountable in the future so that, for example, rate information that the department requests is actually delivered in a timely manner?
Thank you, Senator Alquist, first for the kind words. SCAN is definitely an area, it's a lessons learned for the department where we need to continue to improve and make sure that we are using our finite dollars effectively. And we have taken many actions to change what happened with SCAN. Specifically related to SCAN, as you noted, we redid the whole rates and reduced it by 70%. We were able to get SCAN finally to give us on a quarterly basis their cost data so that we can continue to monitor what's going on in terms of their costs and accounting so that we can correct right away. The third area is really on accountability, and this gets to your question of what we need to do on a go-forward basis. Now, the SCAN contract's up at the end of 2012, and we need to increase the accountability on plans like SCAN. We need to put stronger measures to hold them accountable if they don't provide us the cost data. That I can look at measures such as penalizing them at higher rates to everything from pulling their contract. And I'm going to be exploring that. I'm going to be exploring on another level, which I know you've raised before, on the question of whether we should be having an ability to recoup, which gets into questions of maybe we need a share in savings that a plan has. And I'm going to look at that. There's a question of the benefit and the risks of the states of getting into those types of arrangements, but if you have situations like SCAN, we need to look at it, and I'm committed to doing it. And as we get closer to end of 2012, I'd like to, or even as we go, continue to brief you on where we're going with that contract. But it fundamentally is about accountability and holding them more accountable in the future.
So, thank you. Do you believe that future contracts should provide the department with a direct recovery mechanism, the clawback?
I think this is something, as we look at the contract, when you have such issues about huge profit, it raises the question of maybe we should have had, even if it was a risk-based contract, the ability to recoup. And I'm going to be exploring that on these types of contracts. It could be a shared savings where a certain amount, after a certain amount, it comes back to the state. But we have to look at both the benefit to the state of that, of potential risks where we might have to actually share in the losses of a plan. So I'm going to look at it. I think you've raised and continue to raise, and as I appreciate, this is a learning, as I said, that you've been continuing to push us to be better in this area.
Thank you. The reason I spend time on this is that in the future, it may not be SCAN, it may be another entity, but we need a refinement in contracts with an accountability built into it that we're actually looking at how much we're spending. As an example, the department found in a 2010 audit that there was a 25% discrepancy in the level of care Medi-Cal beneficiaries required, a discrepancy between what the department thought they required, and it was 25% higher from SCAN. It was money that really did not need to be spent, and it was certain environments in which elderly people were put in that they did not need to be put in when they could do more in a more independent kind of environment. So there are many reasons. Okay, so I think I'll just make this the last question. Can the department actually provide safeguards within a contract and provide sufficient oversight to plans like SCAN to ensure the protection of taxpayer dollars?
Yes, Senator Alquist. I think we're already doing that now with some of the changes we've made with SCAN, and I'm doing it similarly with PACE plans, making sure that in all cases we have the costs and a rate-setting methodology. But that's not enough. We're going to look at, as I mentioned, more accountability built into the contracts related to provisions of being able to penalize at higher rates to even pulling contracts if they do not provide us the appropriate data to make sure that we are paying a rate that is appropriate to the cost of doing business.
Thank you. And then just to reiterate back on ADHC, you know how concerned we all are and how we really need to know, I believe, at least a couple of weeks before the December 1st deadline, whether we're going to be able to make that deadline, and if not, what the backup plan is to help all of those people, because for some of them it will be a life or death situation. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Senator Alquist.
Thank you, Senator Alquist. Senator Fuller.
Well, we had a very in-depth conversation in my office, and my questions mirrored Senator Steinberg and Senator Alquist's questions, so I'll pass. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much, Senator Harman and Senator De Leon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I wanted to explore with you, well, let me start out. One of my Senate Republican colleagues, Senator Anderson, sent you a letter, unfortunately, it was just yesterday, so I don't know if you got it.
I've received it, so
okay,
I'm
good. And it deals with this problem with the definition of the term medical necessity. When certain providers, I guess there's a limit of 7 visits per year, and if the provider provides treatment beyond that, more than 7 times, they have to fall within an exception. One of those exceptions is medical necessity. As I understand it, that term medical necessity is defined in federal regulations, but it's not defined in state regulations. So the provider says it's a medical necessity, that's why we provided the treatment. We're asking for reimbursement, and the reimbursement claim is denied on the grounds that it's not medical necessity. And so the providers, particularly in rural hospitals and rural providers, rural areas of the state, are having a real problem with that. You maybe had a moment to think about Senator Anderson's issue, and I wonder if you could address what can be done to try and straighten that problem out. I can see where somebody would be pretty frustrated, where they'd send the claim in and then say, no, we're not going to pay. It's not a medical necessity, and it's not even defined. So tell me what you think about that.
Great. Thank you, Senator Harmon. First of all, this is another one of the very difficult budget reductions that were enacted this past year, where there is a 7-limit cap on the number of physician visits, with some exceptions related to tied to necessary care to make sure that it doesn't lead to inpatient, to emergency room for higher types of chronic conditions. What we're doing in this area, and what I was going to reach back out to the Senator, is that we are defining through what's called a provider bulletin process, where we actually lay out guidelines on what is going to constitute the types of visits that can go above this cap. And we're going to do this in a process that gets back to what I said about bringing stakeholders together. We are going to have stakeholder discussion. In early September, we're bringing providers together to get their input on what should be the criteria that build out of what was in state statute, what are the more common practices of what should be above that 7-visit limit, and get providers input. And we would be happy to get your staff to participate as well, to listen in, or I could get back to you. But it will be a process of consulting with providers both in the rural areas as well as in urban areas to make sure.
I think it's Senator Anderson rather than myself that has the greater interest in that. I would suggest you think about bringing him into the loop. That would be nice.
Okay.
But what about just adopting the federal standard? Could we do that? Is that reasonable? And so everybody's on the same page, federal and state?
Well, this gets to the difficult fact. We made the legislature and the governor enacted a cap on visits that goes beyond just the traditional medical necessary. Every visit that's going on right now above that 7-visit cap would meet a determination on the federal standard of medical necessity. We have created state law that is even making a stricter guideline that's saying, well, it could have been necessary, but it's only for it's not life-threatening. It's not going to lead to an inpatient visit. So we're going to have to further define it beyond just the federal standard, or else we won't achieve the savings that the legislature and the governor enacted. It's a very difficult one.
You indicated there was going to be some kind of a task force or something, and when will the task force be concluding their discussions and coming up with a recommendation or solution?
Well, we'll have the provider meeting in early September. We're going to be sending out announcements shortly about that. We're meeting with, first we had gotten a request from the California Primary Care Association, and we're meeting with them, and then we'll be meeting with other providers separately. We are at the same time having to get federal approval for this change. So until the federal approval is, we won't have the final guidelines. So I'm hoping in the next couple months that it will be done.
Thank you very much on that issue. And quickly, one issue going back to the adult day healthcare situation. Some of the providers, adult day healthcare in my district, have complained to me, perhaps, or at least communicated to me, would be a better phraseology, that they weren't involved or consulted or allowed to participate in the adoption of this transition plan. Is that true? Did you consult? Did your department consult and bring them in? And tell me what your version of their involvement was as this transition plan was considered and adopted.
This is a hard area because there's been just a continual tension that the elimination of the benefit is obviously exactly not what the providers want. They wanted the benefit continue, and I understand why they would. And we've had stakeholder meetings back when the benefit was eliminated in May. We reached out to stakeholders, and continuously the feedback we're getting is you're not going to be able to transition them to anything else. That we have tried to gain constructive input.
And the plan is to go to managed health care, is that?
Yeah, and so it's fair to say that the transition plan, the one that we came out with on managed care, was one that was constructed primarily, it was constructed with the principles of, we need to make sure that we have a transition plan that moves individuals to other alternative services and allows them to remain independently. We did not receive constructive input from the providers, and I understand why. We have since received some feedback, for example, on discharge planning, the difficulty on the discharge planning, and what we've done is change the transition plan to be able to add in that we will reimburse the centers for discharge planning. We've received input about concern about the number of waiver slots, and we've increased the number of home and community-based waiver slots. So we're trying to take the feedback. But I think there's a fundamental issue, and this is what Senator Steinberg, just a concern that it doesn't matter what the department does, the transition plan isn't going to work, and we're committed to making it work.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator Harmon. Senator before we get to Senator De Leon, can we, Ina, can we get through this questioning? Okay, go ahead. Just always, court reporter always comes first. It's a deal. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Pro Tem. Let me put it bluntly. They didn't communicate in my office. They complained very loudly and boldly. And I know we had an opportunity to meet, albeit very brief, and that was more so my fault. You were there on time. I was just being pulled in many different directions. I do appreciate your patience with me. As Mr. Harmon, Senator Harmon just noted, back in his home district in Orange County, he has quite a few folks, constituents who are clients of ADHC. I represent arguably the most diverse district, if not in the United States, on planet Earth. When you have Filipino town, Little Armenia, Thai town, all of Chinatown, all of Koreatown, all of Little Tokyo, as well as Little Central America and Boyle Heights, which is probably the largest concentration of Mexican and Mexican immigrants in the nation. It's an amazing mosaic. It's also a working class district. You have the working poor and you have the working class who struggle every day to try to make ends meet. Subsequently, because of that, obviously, or consequently because of that, we have a lot of folks who are senior citizens who obviously don't have the financial wherewithal to fend for themselves. They don't have 401k plans, pension plans, IRA, Roth investments, property, what have you, et cetera. So outside the ADHC programs, it's very difficult for them to survive on a daily basis. I do believe the ADHC programs have its role. I think it's had a very vital role. It was much to our consternation, members around this horseshoe panel, that we made very deep cuts that were very emotional for many of us, because we see their faces day in and day out. It's almost akin to sort of feeling that you're making cuts on your own grandmother, if you will, when you see all these women and men, and mostly women, they outlive, for a whole variety of reasons, the men, and so it's very emotional, and it's very heartbreaking. Obviously, the governor, for his own reasons, vetoed AB 96. As discussed today, you'll be receiving a letter that's been signed by members of the legislature, not all, but some, from Assembly Member Mariko Yamada on the issue of ADHC. So specifically, Mr. Douglas, we didn't know the cuts have ever been made. Do you have any, is the department planning on doing any tracking, if you will, on the outcomes of these individuals who will be at a loss without the traditional ADHC programs, and what the cost factors are, i.e., say, for example, nursing homes, because I think part of the policy arguments with regards to the cuts was that in reality on the back end, number one, there are not enough beds in reality in the state of California, and number two, the ones that are available are awfully costly, much more than a ADHC program. So I want to know if the administration, through your person, will be doing any tracking on the outcomes as a direct correlation to these draconian cuts.
Thank you, Senator De Leon. Again, this is, as I said, is a really tough transition, and I've been doing a lot of work on stakeholders. I went down to Los Angeles last Friday and went to Senator Liu's district, met with many providers there, and I know, been to some of the providers in your district, including Altamed. These are good providers, and there will be impacts on both
the providers, and most importantly, the beneficiaries. And it is important to track and monitor what the implications are, and a big piece of what we're doing, and we just sent to Assemblymember Yamada our tracking and monitoring plan, is that we are going to track because we need to know what occurs. And it's similar, we're doing a similar on adult dental. We are going to be combining data from Medicare as well as Medi-Cal to be able to look at what's the changes in inpatient utilization. Because beyond just nursing facility, you're right, there's questions about capacity on nursing facility. There's movement in and out of inpatients, so we'll look at that. Nursing facility use, we'll be looking at the plans and their accountability on doing the assessments and tracking the number of assessments done, the types of services that are provided, IHSS, hours. So all those pieces will be part of an ongoing monitoring that we will do to continue both short-term and long-term to assess the implications.
One more follow-up question, Mr. Pro Tem. As you accumulate the empirical data to see what the outcomes are and what are the outcomes, whatever they may be, what are you going to do with the data?
Well, I hope you can tell from that my job is to be honest and continue to report on what's going on, and I would plan on presenting that data to the legislature as soon as it's available. Some of it's not going to be immediate because of lags on getting data, but as soon as it's ready, that data would be presented publicly on what the outcomes, and make sure that if we're seeing major impacts that we're correcting and fixing.
How long is the tracking process? From what point to what point are we talking?
I don't have that at this time because part of it's going to be, we're going to have, on the short term, what we're doing, as I said, there's certain areas where we can track real time, such as assessments done by the managed care plans, and that will be important, is how many are going into managed care, when's the assessment done, what other services, and that will be able to track. But being able to track and look at inpatient utilization, nursing facility utilization, that may take longer to look at and get the data and be able to compile it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Douglas. Just one last thing, is just commentary. Very much so. I think the members of this committee, as well as the legislature as a whole, in both chambers, will be very interested in knowing what the end results are of this study once the data, once it's concluded. Thank you.
Before we call it public testimony, I think it'd be time for a break. I'll just add that if you're looking for any assistance in this difficult task, I know that Jacob Applesmith is looking for a little bit of work to do, so just might give him a ring. Let's take a 10-minute break. Thank you.